Howdy do, squirrels! My light's about had it. Time for more batteries. I need to get me a new charger. Or maybe just new batteries. They're rechargeable. I hate buying batteries. It's not good for the earth. Chapter 10 is called Joe's Journal. Remember, she was wanting to take off to New York. November. Dear Marmee and Beth, I'm going to write you a regular volume, for I've got heaps to tell. Though I'm not a fine young lady traveling on the continent, when I lost sight of Father's dear old face, I felt a trifle blue, and might have shed a briny drop or two if an Irish lady with 4 small children all crying more or less hadn't diverted my mind, for I amused myself by dropping gingerbread nuts over the seat every time they opened their mouths to roar. Soon the sun came out, and taking it as a good omen, I cleared up likewise and enjoyed my journey with all my heart. Mrs. Kirk welcomed me so kindly I felt at home at once, even in that big house full of strangers. She gave me a funny little sky parlor, all she had, but there's a stove in it and a nice table and a sunny window, so I can sit here and write whenever I like. A fine view and a church tower opposite atoned for the many stairs, and I took a fancy to my den on the spot. The nursery where I'm to teach and sew is a pleasant room next Mrs. Kirk's private parlor, and the 2 little girls are pretty children, rather spoiled, I fancy, but they took to me after telling them the 7 bad pigs, and I've no doubt I shall make a model governess. I am to have my meals with the children if I prefer it to the great table, and for the present I do, for I am bashful, though no one will believe it. Now, my dear, make yourself at home, said Mrs. K in her motherly way. I'm on the drive from morning till night, as you may suppose with such a family, but a great anxiety will be off my mind if I know the children are safe with you. My rooms are always open to you, and your own shall be as comfortable as I can make it. There are some pleasant people in the house if you feel sociable, and your evenings are always free. Come to me if anything goes wrong, and be as happy as you can. There's the tea bell. I must run and change my cap, and off she bustled, leaving me to settle myself in my new nest. As I went downstairs soon after, I saw something I liked. The flights are very long in this tall house, and as I stood waiting at the head of the 3rd one for a little servant girl to lumber up, I saw a gentleman come along behind her, take the heavy hod of coal out of her hand, carry it all the way up, and put it down at a door nearby, and walk away saying with a kind nod and a foreign accent, "It goes better so. The little back is too young to have such heaviness." Wasn't it good of him? I like such things, for as Father says, trifles show character. When I mentioned it to Mrs. K that evening, she laughed and said, "That must have been Professor Bear. He's always doing things of that sort," and it's spelled Bhaer. Mrs. K told me he was from Berlin, very learned and good, but poor as a church mouse, and gives lessons to support himself and 2 little orphan nephews whom he is educating here, according to the wishes of his sister, who married in America. Not a very romantic story, but it interested me, and I was glad to hear that Mrs. K lends him her parlor for some of his scholars. There is a glass door between it and the nursery, and I mean to peep at him. And then I'll tell you how he looks. He's almost 40, so it's no harm, Marmee. After tea and a go-to-bed romp with the little girls, I attacked the big work basket and had a quiet evening chatting with my new friend. I shall keep a journal letter and send it once a week. So good night and more tomorrow. Tuesday Eve. Had a lovely time in my seminary this morning, for the children acted like Sancho, and at one time I really thought I should shake them all around. Some good angel inspired me to try gymnastics, and I kept it up till they were all glad to sit down and keep still. After luncheon, the girl took them out for a walk, and I went to my needlework like little Mabel with a willing mind. I was thanking my stars that I'd learned to make nice buttonholes, when the parlor door opened and shut, and someone began to hum Kent's de Dossland like a big bumblebee. It was dreadfully improper, I know, but I couldn't resist the temptation, and lifting one end of the curtain before the glass door, I peeped in. Professor Bear was there, and while he arranged his books, I took a good look at him. A regular German, rather stout, with brown hair tumbled all over his head, a bushy beard, a good nose, the kindest eyes I've ever seen, and a splendid big voice that does one's ears good, after our sharp and slipshod American gabble. His clothes were rusty, his hands were large, and he hadn't a really handsome feature in his face except his beautiful teeth. Yet I liked him, for he had a fine head. His linen was very nice, and he looked like a gentleman, though 2 buttons were off his coat and there was a patch on one shoe. He looked rather sober, and in spite of his he looked sober in spite of his humming, till he went to the window to turn the hyacinth bulbs towards the sun and stroke the cat, who received him like an old friend. Then he smiled, and when a tap came at the door, calling out in a loud brisk tone, "Herein!" I was just going to run when I caught sight of a morsel of a child carrying a big book, and stopped to see what was going on. Me wants me bear," said the mite, slamming down her book and running to meet him. "Thou shalt have thy bear. Come then, and make a good hug from him, my Tina," said the professor, catching her up with a laugh and holding her so high over his head that she had to stoop her little face to kiss him. "Now me must tuddy my lesson," went on the funny little thing, so he put her up at the table, opened the great dictionary she had brought, and gave her a pencil and paper, and she scribbled away, turning a leaf now and then, and passing her fat little finger down the page as if finding a word, so soberly that I nearly betrayed myself by a laugh, while Mr. Bear stood stroking her pretty hair with a fatherly look that made me think she must be his own, though she looked more French than German. Another knock on the appearance of 2 young ladies sent me back to my work, and there I virtuously remained through all the noise and gabbling that went on in the next door. One of the girls kept laughing affectedly and saying, "Now, Professor," in a coquettish tone, and the other pronounced her German with an accent that must have made it hard for him to keep sober. Both seemed to try his patience sorely, for more than once I heard him say emphatically, "No, no, it is not so. You have not attend to what I say. And once there was a loud rap, as if he struck the table with his book, followed by the despairing exclamation, "Prut! It all goes bad this day." Poor man, I pitied him, and when the girls were gone, took just one more peep to see if he survived it. Survived it. He seemed to have thrown himself back in his chair, tired out, and sat there with his eyes shut till the clock struck 2, when he jumped up, put his books in his pocket, as if ready for another lesson, and taking little Tina, who had fallen asleep on the sofa, in his arms, he carried her quietly away. I fancy he has a hard life of it, Mrs. Kirk asked me if I wouldn't go down to the 5 o'clock dinner, and feeling a little bit homesick, I thought I would, just to see what sort of people are under the same roof with me. So I made myself respectable and tried to slip in behind Mrs. Kirk, but as she is short and I'm very tall, my efforts at concealment were rather a failure. She gave me a seat by her, and after my face cooled off, I plucked up courage and looked around me. The long table was full, and everyone intent on getting their dinner, and the gentlemen especially, who seemed to be eating on time, for they bolted in every sense of the word, vanishing as soon as they were done. There was the usual assortment of young men absorbed in themselves, young couples absorbed in each other, married ladies and their babies, and old gentlemen in politics. I don't think I shall care. Let's see, I don't think I shall care to have much to do with any of them, except one sweet-faced maiden lady who looks as if she had something in her. Cast away at the very bottom of the table was the professor, shouting answers to the questions of a very inquisitive, deaf old gentleman on one side and talking philosophy with a Frenchman on the other. If Amy had been here, she'd have turned her back on him forever, because, sad to relate, he had a great appetite and shoveled in his dinner in a manner which would have horrified her ladyship. I didn't mind, for I like to see folks eat with a relish, as Hannah says, and the poor man must have needed a deal of food after teaching idiots all day. As I went upstairs after dinner, 2 of the young men were settling their hats before the hall mirror, and I heard one say low to the other, "Who's the new party?" "Governess or something of that sort." "What the deuce is she at our table for?" "Friend of the old lady's. Handsome head, but no style. Not a bit of it. Give us a light and come on." "Not a bit of it." Let's see, wait a minute. I felt angry at first, and then I didn't care, for a governess is as good as a clerk, and I've got sense if I haven't got style, which is more than some people have, judging from the remarks of the elegant beings who clattered away, smoking like bad chimneys. I hate ordinary people. Thursday. Yesterday was a quiet day spent in teaching, sewing, and writing in my little room, which is very cozy, with a light and a fire. I picked up a few bits of news and was introduced to the professor. It seems that Tina is the child of a French woman who does the fine ironing in the laundry here. The little thing has lost her heart to Mr. Bear and follows him about the house like a dog whenever he is at home, which delights him, as he is very fond of children. Though a bachelor, Kitty and Minnie Kirk likewise regard him with affection and tell all sorts of stories about the plays he invents, the presents he brings, and the splendid tales he tells. The young men quiz him, it seems. Call him old Fritz, Lager Beer, Ursa Major, and make all manners of jokes on his name. But he enjoys it like a boy, Mrs. Kirk says, and takes it so good-naturedly that they all like him in spite of his foreign ways. The maiden lady is Miss Norton, rich, cultivated, and kind. She spoke to me at dinner today, for I went to table again. It's such fun to watch people. And asked me to come and see her room. She has fine books and pictures, knows interesting persons, and seems friendly, so I shall make myself agreeable For I do want to get into good society, only it isn't the same sort that Amy likes. I was in our parlor last evening. When Mr. Bear came in with some newspapers for Mrs. Kirk. She wasn't there, but Minnie, who's a little old woman, introduced me very prettily. This is Mama's friend, Miss March. Yes, and she's jolly, and we like her lots, added Kitty, who is an infant terrible. ENFANT. We both bowed, and then we laughed, for the prim introduction and the blunt addition were rather a comical contrast. Ah, yes, I hear these. Let's see. Doggone it. Blunt addition. Rather comical contrast. Oh, yes, I hear these naughty ones go to vex you, Mies Marsh. If so, call at me, and I come, he said with a threatening frown that delighted the very wretches. I promised I would, and he departed. But it seems as if I was doomed to see a good deal of him, for today as I passed his door on my way out, by accident I knocked against it. Look at the door. By accident, I knocked against it with my umbrella. It flew open, and there he stood in his dressing gown with a big blue sock on one hand and a darning needle in the other. These fruit flies from my fruity teas. I figured out that's what they're after. Not gonna dressing gown, darning needle. He didn't seem at all ashamed of it, for when I explained and hurried on, he waved his hand, sock and all, saying in his loud, cheerful way, You have a fine day to make your walk. Bon voyage, mademoiselle. I laughed all the way downstairs, but it was a little pathetic also to think of the poor man having to mend his own clothes. The German gentlemen embroider, I know, but darning hose is another thing, and not so pretty. Saturday. Time to whistle. Almost out. Dang. Blah-de, blah-de, blah. Nothing has happened to write about except to call Miss Norton, who has a room full of pretty things, and who was very charming, for she showed me all her treasures, and asked me if I would sometimes go with her to lectures and concerts as her escort, if I enjoyed them. Blah, blah. She put it as a favor, but I'm sure Mrs. Kirk has told her about us, and she does it out of kindness to me. I'm as proud as Lucifer, but such favors from such people don't burden me, and I accepted gratefully. When I got back to the nursery, there was such an uproar in the parlor that I looked in, and there was Mr. Bear down on his hands and knees, with Tina on his back, Kitty leading him with the jump rope, and Minnie feeding two small boys with seed cakes as they roared and ramped in cages built of chairs. We're playing Nagerie, explained Kitty. This is mine elephant, added Tina, holding on by the professor's hair. Mama always allows us to do what we like Saturday afternoon. When Franz and Emil come, doesn't she, Mr. Bear? Said Minnie. The effluent, I don't know if I said it right all ago. The effluent sat up looking as much in earnest as any of them, and said soberly to me, I give you my word, it is so. If we make too large a noise, you shall say hush to us, and we go more softly. I promised to do so, but left the door open. and enjoyed the fun as much as they did, for a more glorious frolic I never witnessed. They played tag, and soldiers danced and sang, and when it began to grow dark, they all piled onto the sofa about the professor, while he told charming fairy stories of the storks on the chimney tops and the little cobleds who ride the snowflakes as they fall. I wish Americans were as simple and natural as Germans, don't you? I'm so fond of writing. I should go spinning on forever if motives of economy didn't stop me, for though I've used thin paper and written fine, I tremble to think of the stamps this long letter will need. Pray forward, Amy's, as soon as you can spare them. My small news will sound very flat after her splendors, but you will like them, I know. For you will like them, I know. Is Teddy studying so hard that he can't find time to write to his friends? Take good care of him for me, Beth. And tell me all about the babies, and give heaps of love to everyone. From your faithful Joe. P.S. On reading over my letter, it strikes me as rather buried, but I'm always interested in odd people, and I really had nothing else to write about, bless you. December, my precious Betsy, as this is to be a scribble-scrabble letter, I direct it at you, for it may amuse you and give you some idea of my goings-on. For though quiet, they are rather amusing, for which, oh, be joyful. After what Amy would call Herculean efforts in the way of mental and moral agriculture, my young ladies begin to shoot. Wait a minute. In the way of mental and moral agriculture, my young ideas began to shoot, and my little twigs to bend as I could wish. They are not so interesting to me as Tina and the boys, but I do my duty. I do my duty by them, and they are fond of me. Franz and Emil are jolly little lads, quite after my own heart, for the mixture of German and American spirit in them produces a rather produces a constant state of effervescence. Saturday afternoons are riotous times, whether spent in the house or out, for on pleasant days they all go for a walk. Go for a walk like a seminary with the professor and myself to keep order, and then such fun. We're very good friends now, and I've begun to take lessons. I really couldn't help it, and it all came about in such a droll way that I must tell you. To begin at the beginning, Mrs. Kirk called to me one day as I passed Mr. Bear's room where she was rummaging. Did ever you see such a mess, my dear? Just come and help me put these books to rights. For I've turned everything upside down, trying to discover what he has done with the 6 new handkerchiefs I gave him not long ago. I went in, and while we worked, I looked about me, for it was a den, to be sure, books and papers everywhere, a broken Meerschaum. No idea what that is. And an old flute over the mantelpiece, as if done with a ragged bird without any tail, on one windowsill, and a box of white mice adorned the other. Half-finished boats and bits of string lay among the manuscripts. Dirty little boots stood drying before the fire, and traces of the dearly beloved boys for whom he makes a slave of himself were to be seen all over the room. After a grand rummage, fellas. After a grand rummage, 3 of the missing articles were found. One over the bird cage, one covered with ink, and a third burned brown, having been used as a holder. Lordy, this chapter's so long. Let me see how much more I got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whew, I'm going to stop here, guys. Stop here. Prima letters, amend them, I don't mind. Okay, having been used as a holder. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Long, but it's fun. And that Professor Bear, you know what's going to happen with him and Joe. Love y'all. Oh, I'm going to go fix myself some strong Julie coffee. I'm out of Julie coffee. I got to go get some more. But I've got regular coffee. See y'all later. Love you bunches. Sleep well tonight. And see you in the YouTube streets. Love ya. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye.